Good evening, all. It was a fellow named Charlie Plumb. Signed up for the Navy. Ended up in air school. Ended up out at Miramar in San Diego. And he was down the list for flight training of the F-4s, or for service in the F-4s. There was kind of a waiting list. So he was flying these little trainers. The F-4 could go twice the speed of sound. These little trainers couldn't even hit Mach 1. Him and his buddy would go out and do their little patrols or whatever, training patrols. And if they had extra time, they would stay out there and try to connect with one of the F-4 pilots and get in a mock dogfight with them. And they were just eating them alive because they had quicker turning radius. The F-4s could outrun them easily, but they would be out there just kind of harassing them in general. Came back to base one day and there was a note that said Plumb and whatever his backseater's name was. Come to the commander's office immediately. Oh crap. So they went in there, said, "You flying these planes?" "Yes, sir." "Are you flying them out off the coast, harassing F-4s?" "Yes, sir." "Did you harass one today?" "Yes, sir." "Do you know who was flying that plane?" "No, sir. It was me." So they thought they were busted big time. Commander says, "We've got a problem. My F-4 pilots are all telling me that you guys are just eating them alive. We can't have that. Would you consider running a training course on how to get to these F-4s and how the F-4 should evade them?" "Yes, sir." So they started what would eventually turn into the Top Gun school. Pretty soon he got shipped out to Vietnam. Ran a whole bunch of missions, I think 70 plus, 75 maybe. On his next mission, he was part of an enormous undertaking. There were dozens, if not scores, of planes in this mission. And it was to be his last mission, because he was getting out of the Air Force, or out of the Navy, I should say. As they were flying in over Hanoi, boom, felt a big thump. Gauges went crazy. He could see fire trailing the plane. The plane flipped over and was headed down quickly, very quickly. Well, they couldn't eject. They could, but unadvisable to eject upside down. So he managed to get the plane righted, just enough time to eject. They were shooting at him the whole way down. Landed in a rice paddy. Saw his co-pilot land 100 yards or so away. And he was very quickly confronted by a villager carrying what he described as a battle axe, basically. He said we'd never been taught how to deal with that kind of weapon before. He still had his 38 on his chest, covered in mud so they couldn't see it. Very quickly he was surrounded by about 12 people. They were smacking at him with shovels and hoes and all kinds of stuff. One of those guys finally saw his 38, took it out. He's still trying to wipe mud out of his eyes and things like that. Next thing he knows, that gun's pointed up against his head. And he could see well enough to see that there were 2 rounds removed from the cylinder. He had removed one. This other guy had removed one, not knowing one was already removed. And then he heard click. The guy laughed and ran off with his gun. Well, just like most of these POW stories, he was loaded on a truck of some sort, shipped up to Hanoi. It wasn't very far for him. And pretty soon he was in the interrogation room. Name, rank, serial number. And he was read part of the camp rules, and one of those rules was you must answer every question we ask you completely and truthfully. If not, that's a violation and you will be punished for it. What kind of plane were you flying? I can't answer that. Why not? Because your country signed the Geneva Convention, and under those rules, prisoners of war only have to give rank, name, rank, and serial number. You're not prisoner. You war criminal. What kind of plane you fly? I can't answer it. You either talk to me or you talk to the steel. Then Charlie said, "Bring it on." He had no idea what he was inviting. If you know anything about Vietnamese prison camps, they were ruthless to say the least. And they were ruthless to him. And he very quickly, after about an hour, the interrogator came back in and said, "You talk?" "Yes." Felt terrible about it. "What kind of plane are you flying?" "An F-4B. He said they already knew what kind of plane I was flying because it was laying in the field beside me. So lying about it at that point served no purpose, and I didn't want to go through what I had just been through again. Charlie's story is a very interesting one to me among all of the POW stories that I've heard, because he focused on what kept him alive, what kept him motivated, what gave him hope, that kind of stuff. He never focused on the negative. And in a way, he didn't see himself as much of a prisoner as he saw the North Vietnamese people, because he thought eventually he would be repatriated. They would have to stay there. And that's a very interesting point. Anyway, he talked about different things they did to be able to communicate, and different things they did to frustrate the Vietnamese, and different things they did to fight back, and all this stuff. And I've heard several of them talk about this stuff. Well, he eventually got released with all the rest of them. And when he got out, he asked 2 or 3 people about his wife, and nobody would answer him. And he thought, this can't be good. And he finally came in contact with a pastor. I can't remember the word I'm looking for, but he said, look, I need you to be honest with me. Nobody will tell me what's going on with my wife, and I need you to tell me how is she? What's happening? Well, this guy said, she sent me a letter, and I don't want to read it. I want you to read it. Apparently, she's having some misgivings. Well, it turned out that she had filed for divorce, gotten engaged. She didn't want anything to do with him. And he very graciously let that go and let her have her divorce and didn't fight it and anything. And his reasoning was, she has been through just as much hell as I have these past 6 years. If she wasn't able to handle it, why do I want to continue to put her through hell over something she had no control over and I had no control over? So he just let it happen. And that was his attitude with almost everything he talked about. He had the most unbelievably positive, useful attitude, I think, of any POW I've ever heard speak. So I'm going to leave a link to a podcast he was on. You can hear him. And this one's a long one, I'll warn you, but it's well worth a listen. Well worth it. If you're at all interested in this subject. It's one of the more unique POW stories that I've heard. So Mr. Plumb, I salute you. I salute your perseverance, your faith, your positive outlook on life, then as well as now. Your continued support of veterans. He goes all around the country telling his story, and he reaches a lot of people. And like all these other guys I've talked about, that is, you cannot quantify the importance of what this man's doing. So I honor you, Mr. Plumb. You are worthy, and you're an inspiration to people. And I say keep up the good work.